Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I'm sharing with you some resources for painting, watercoloring, and form drawing, specifically for a Waldorf homeschool or Waldorf classroom. I do have a couple other books that I'm going to share with you as well. The first book is called Painting and Drawing in Waldorf Schools Classes 1 to 8. This is a tremendous resource. It's going to go over watercoloring and drawing for all the grades as well as different main lesson blocks. This is an amazing resource that I highly recommend, especially if you're first starting out your homeschooling journey or your teaching journey. If you don't get an opportunity to take a watercoloring class or a drawing class, this is going to really help you through that process and walk you through the watercoloring techniques as well as the drawing techniques. The next book I want to share with you is called Color Dynamics. This is by Angela Lord. This is a workbook for watercolor painting and color theory. What I love about this book is that the beginning pages talk about color theory and watercoloring technique. Then as you go through, you can start with just one color and really work with that one color with lighter and darker tones, as well as lifting the color from your watercolor painting. You can do the same thing with each of the primary colors. It is a beautiful walkthrough of using these watercolor techniques. It includes a little bit of veil painting as well and wet on wet watercoloring. We've used this in our homeschool, and I really love the artistic nature of watercoloring on wet watercoloring, which is very different than watercoloring on dry watercolor paper. This is especially helpful when you are teaching young children, but it is also really therapeutic for adults as well. So if you are thinking, oh, my children are older or they're too young, or that you don't even know if you want to do this, then I highly encourage you to try just a little bit. You'll be really surprised at how enjoyable the process is. And then of course, this book gets into more complicated illustrations and mixing different watercolor colors in order to produce your secondary colors, and then intensity with those colors, and also lifting those colors in order to produce some negative spaces in essence. All right, let's move on to some other books by Angela Lord, and that would be the form drawing workbooks. Angela Lord has several books on form drawing. This one is workbook 1 for children age 6 to 10. This is creative form drawing. And if you don't get to do any teacher training or any classes on form drawing, this is going to walk you through the process step by step, including things that you can do prior to actually putting crayon to paper. And that would include teaching methods for your students starting in grade 1, where you can work the forms by walking them, by drawing them in the air with your hands or other body parts before you actually use your writing utensil and then draw it onto the paper. And then this will take you grade level by grade level so that your form drawings can get more intense, and each grade has a different focus. And so you can see here that symmetry comes into play, and that's a really important part of the child's development and how that can be reflected in form drawing. The next book is Creative Form Drawing Workbook number 2. This is for older students, and you can see that the form drawings have become more intricate, a little bit more complicated, and you can see a lot of geometry sort of come through these form drawings, and that's appropriate because students will be doing geometry starting in grade 5 and then continuing to grade 6. There are also sort of like Norse mythology forms that would definitely be used in grade 4, and that you could include that into your main lesson book, especially if you need a divider between your paragraphs for your written work, for your narration. Doing some of these forms would be really beautiful. And you can also use these forms by working them with rope, or drawing them on sand, or walking them and then having your partner walk the symmetry of the form that you did. There's a lot of different techniques that you can use in working with these forms. So it's not just on paper, but it's really a holistic approach to the form drawing. The next book is Creative Form Drawing for the 4 Temperaments. This one is amazing. If you haven't gone into the 4 temperaments yet, I highly encourage you to do so. There are a couple extra books that are linked in the description box below if you're interested in exploring the different temperaments. This book specifically targets the temperaments and provides forms and form drawing that can help bring balance and harmony to the temperaments. So we do have a dominant temperament, we do have like a secondary temperament, secondary and tertiary temperaments, and then we have the 4th temperament that we don't really identify with that much. We want to bring harmony to our temperaments so that we are in balance with all 4, and form drawing is one of many ways to bring harmony and balance to the temperaments. The last book by Angela Lord that I want to share with you is called Form Drawing and Coloring for Fun, Healing, and Well-Being. This one really works well after the creative form drawing for the 4 temperaments, because now we're looking at form drawing as a way of healing and well-being. And if you have not explored drawing as a way of therapy, then I highly encourage you to do so. You may not realize that a creative outlet is as important to you and your well-being as exercise or breathing fresh air or even the food that nourishes you. For some people, a creative outlet, especially in drawing, is so important to their well-being. If you didn't realize that about yourself, exploring a book like this might help you find some healing in drawing. I have a few more books on watercoloring that I want to share with you. This one's called Colors of the West, and this would be a really great resource if you want to include some illustrations into your botany or zoology main lesson blocks or unit studies. These illustrations give you some great inspiration that you can copy, as well as techniques. This kind of watercoloring is very different than the wet-on-wet watercoloring that you're mostly going to find in a Waldorf setting, but the illustrations are breathtaking. Another book that you might enjoy is called Watercolor with Me in the Forest. This book is unlike other watercoloring books that I've seen because you can watercolor directly into this book. So it tells you the colors to use, it gives you an example of what you're working with, and it gives you a basic outline. So it makes watercoloring really easy, very enjoyable, and quite successful. So here's a brief look at some of the, oh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I did not watercolor that one, my sister did, but it is just amazing to have a resource like this where you're taken a little bit of the way, you're given really great quality watercolor paper. You just need to supply your own watercolors, and then you can really enjoy the process in a way that if you are new to watercoloring, you can feel very successful with this book. I have 3 more books to share with you. This one's called Celestial Watercolor. We used this one year in our homeschool when we were working on our astronomy main lesson block, because this is a great way to watercolor the different constellations. I really love the way they've used negative space here. You can do this in a number of ways. You could actually use a white wax crayon to draw your constellation and even a little bit of your images, and then watercolor over it, and wherever your wax crayon was on the paper, the watercolor is not going to penetrate the paper. So it's a really lovely technique that you can use. This one has some really beautiful illustrations as well as tips on how you can go about doing your illustrations with success, and it includes other illustrations as well. And what I like about this book that's a little different than the other watercolor books that you might see is that everything is done on a circle, and this also is helpful in thinking about the constellations in the sky. So I like that the structure, it's not on a rectangle or square piece of paper. You are actually watercoloring on a circle. So you can either cut your circle out first, or you can draw a circle using a compass and then just stay within the circle. There are some other illustrations that are not circular. You can see some that are just using different shapes to have their illustrations, which I think adds to the creative aspect of watercoloring, and specifically for this book. The next book I want to share with you is called Watercolor in Nature. This is not one of my favorite ones, but I do want to share it with you in case these kinds of illustrations are the kinds that you want to include either in your main lesson blocks or your unit studies or just for enjoyment. I originally got this one when we were working on our botany main lesson block. I especially liked the mushrooms and the ferns, but we ended up not using it as much as we hoped. They weren't quite the illustrations that I was going for, but it is still a really wonderful resource if these are the kinds of watercolors that you like to do. The last book I want to share with you is called Everyday Watercolor. This one is going to go through watercolor techniques. Again, this is different than the Waldorf approach, but this is still a valuable resource if you are new to watercoloring or if you want to take your watercolor images to the next level. I especially love learning about really simple techniques that can help bring realism to your watercolors. Not that you have to have it be true to life, but so that you can get the gestures that look like the images you're trying to make. So learning how to paint trees in a way that you can identify them as different types of trees, or the basic structure of florals, leaves, and animals so that you can feel successful in your watercolors. I hope you enjoyed this look at some of our favorite Waldorf books. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video where you can find more information as well as links to all of these resources. You can find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see what we're reading on a daily basis, you can find me on my website at pepperandpine.com.